Hello and welcome once again to the 1895 podcast with me, Tom.
And me, Rob.
Rob, how have you been? It's good to get back in the studio. 2 weeks in a row we're recording now, which is a good effort from us this year anyway, isn't it?
It is. It very much is, yeah.
And I thought this would be a good opportunity. Last week we looked ahead at the CO2 industry, just off the back of the webinar we held. But I think it'd be good to look ahead to 2026 with a bit of a broad brush.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, we've also covered hydrogen, haven't we? Mm-hmm. With Charlie, our colleague, earlier in January. So it seems appropriate to look at some of the other look ahead areas as well.
And maybe we should start this episode right where we left last episode, talking about CO2 and maybe specifically European CO2, because that's where our event schedule starts this year, when we'll be returning to Rotterdam between the 17th and 19th of March. This will be the second time we've been in Rotterdam for this European CO2 summit. So what you're looking forward to at that event, and what talking tracks can we expect from it too?
Looking forward to being back in Rotterdam and the Netherlands as a whole, actually. And we've had some great experiences there, haven't we, in the last few years?
And some negative with everything being stolen that one time.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But that's another story.
That's another story. That's for the secret pod stories. Yeah, I think we've had some great experiences. As you said, we had the first new look CO2 summit in Rotterdam last year, having been in Austria for so long. What am I looking forward to about the event? I think it's a tricky one because it's been a very stable market, and I think a lot of people have been lulled into a false sense of security by that. And that's a bit of a soapbox moan for me, actually, Tom. I just think people aren't sitting up and paying attention, and quite often when we don't do that, when you do, it's too late. We've seen these big shortages erupt in this market. We're told by numerous very reliable sources, very clued up sources, that the European CO2 market is just on the edge at the moment. It's not going into shortage, but it could very easily. It could just be one dynamic that changes that, and everything's so fragile in the world today and in economies today. Who knows what's going to happen next? So I think it's really foolish to take your eye off this very fast-moving business, this byproduct business, and essentially not attend or not be engaging with the messaging that's coming out in CO2 at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to getting into those talking tracks at the event. And when I say that, we'll be talking about the traditional merchant CO2 business, how it's sourced, what's going on there, what to look out for, what a fertilizer and ammonia market's doing. How fickle are they in 2026 and 27? We'll also be looking at future sourcing, biogenic CO2, biogas, a bit of talk about DAC, direct air capture, a bit of talk about fuel cells, and we'll have some great case studies as well. And there's a lot of different speakers on this agenda, a lot of new names to our audience, and a lot of actually really interesting case studies which we've been pleased to kind of secure.
Yeah, I've got the agenda in front of me here. Listeners can go and view this on gasworld.com/events. And what really stands out to me is the amount of new names that we're seeing on the agenda. I think it's fair to say there are a lot of what we have seen before, familiar faces on stage, those who we trust, those who we know will deliver on stage. But it is equally great to see all these fantastic new names to give their new input and share their experiences within the industry as well.
Yeah, because the CO2 space is evolving. It's no longer, the comments put to me in the last couple of years are it's no longer our backyard. It's no longer the traditional merchant CO2 business. It's sort of a wide open space at the moment. It's this whole CCUS value chain. There's so many different routes into CO2 these days. And the event reflects that, and the agenda reflects that. Was, like you said, so many new names for this CO2 summit. So, yeah, I think if we're talking about a look ahead, we covered CO2 a lot last week. The message is clearly things haven't changed enough. It's been stable, but things haven't changed enough, and there's a lot that's still to come. So everyone needs to get on board with that. They need to get ahead of that curve.
Absolutely. On to our second event of the year now, which is our Specialty Gas Summit. This year going to Frankfurt in Germany, of course, following last year's event in Utrecht. And it's a good time for us to be discussing this on the podcast because you recently uploaded a feature to the gasworld website with our interview with Virginia Esley. There's a number of video clips going out as well, probably as this podcast is released. So look out for those on the gasworld website and on our YouTube and on our socials as well. And this event is again going to be a development on last year's as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny actually because it is just like the CO2 summit in terms of it moved from Austria to Rotterdam to scale, to open up the doors to a bigger audience and wider topics. And we've done exactly the same with this Specialty Gas Summit. We had 2 years in Utrecht, which was fantastic, bit of a tech hub area as well. But now we're moving to Frankfurt, much better transport connections, bigger venue. It feels like the perfect opportunity to scale. And when you look at the dynamics in the market with electronics, semiconductors, chips with everything, critical time to be talking spec gases.
And I'm really looking forward to actually going to Frankfurt. Of course, we went to Germany last year, didn't we, when we conducted that interview, but we only had a matter of, probably about an hour in actual Frankfurt. And I think we spent that by going to get a beer.
Well, when in Frankfurt. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm actually looking forward to visiting the city itself.
I am. In the venue, the Steigenberger looks fantastic. Real historic building. Lots to look forward to there. But there's so much going on in specialty gases. You almost can't cover enough. Whatever you do, you're scratching the surface. There's so much going on. And that's reflected as well in our theme for that event of from lab to fab and beyond. We really want to talk about not just the specialty gases we know about and their availability and their supply chains, but all of the new materials and mixtures and compounds and the new ways of approaching things, and hence, from the cultivation in the lab and the collaboration with partners through to the fab itself, and of course, so many applications beyond that.
And we'll also be discussing specialty gases on an upcoming gasworld webinar on March 27th, where we'll again be joined by Stephen Harrison. Nippon Gases will be joining us on that panel, and I'm sure we can get a bit of a precursor to that specialty gas summit as well. Because
yes, I think we can.
It'd be great to delve into some of that.
And let's not forget as well, spec gases are arguably more important for two reasons. You've not just got this whole chips with everything movement going on and all the spec gases required. Look further afield. Look at what's going on in hydrogen and energy, and how, let's face it, if we're talking blunt terms, the hydrogen bubble has burst from 5 years ago, 6 years ago. A lot of people put all their eggs in those baskets. A lot of companies expanded their portfolios to play in those baskets as well. And most people are retrenching now. They're coming back to the core. They're coming back to those proven areas of expertise and growth, and spec gases are high growth. So there's a lot of emphasis coming back onto specialty gases and where that goes. So perfect time to scale that European Specialty Gas Summit.
And again, looking at the agenda in front of me, you can see it's such a diverse agenda of so many different topics covered. So really don't think you can afford to miss this if you are working within the specialty gas area.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of speakers already announced. I can confidently say there's more coming in the next couple of weeks. Some exciting topics to be confirmed as well around AI and getting to grips with all of that. So yeah, a lot to get into there.
Very exciting. So to keep an eye on the Gasworld Conference's website. On to our next event now. And this is visiting the theme of CO2 again, this time our North American CO2 Summit.
New Orleans, yeah?
Yeah, we just spoke about exciting venues such as Frankfurt, New Orleans or New Orleans.
What a location. That's
certainly going to be a great location, isn't it? What was it that made you choose this place for this event?
The jazz and the blues scene?
Okay.
No, the French Quarter, which is where the event will be, it does look culturally amazing. I think that'll be an incredible experience. Certainly been on my bucket list for a while, but beyond the personal motivations, we take the CO2 Summit in North America to some fantastic places, don't we? Just think about Nashville a couple of years ago, Denver, Colorado last year. There's been Chicago, there's been Indianapolis. New Orleans felt like an up-and-coming place again, and a lot going on, a great events hub. So fantastic place to put it, and so much to talk about as well. We covered CO2 already, but in North America and in the US, I said that we're of the understanding that Europe's walking a tightrope with supply. We're told, we saw it on stage in Denver last year, that there will be shortages in the US CO2 business in 2026, potentially on both the east and west coast, particularly the west. That's categoric. That was the statement put out there, and it's around the next month or so that we're potentially going to see that start to bite. So a lot to get into in the CO2 side in North America.
And a lot can happen between now and then. That's 7 months away, don't forget. So think of everything that can happen in that short amount of time.
We could see a total tempest in a teacup in that time, and we could see far worse as well. So, I think we've got a lot of diverse topics on that one as well. Got to be careful because, I think there can be some green fatigue as well. We're talking about sustainability all the time. This one's diving right into, the merchant CO2 market, the risks and the opportunities. It's going to talk about carbon capture, the opportunities and the tech. It's going to get into dry ice. We brought the dry ice panel back last year. We're going to double down on that in 2026, talking all about that demand and distribution. And something, yes, it was my idea, it's my agenda, but something I really like. We're going to ask at each of the end of the sessions from our panels, whether it's 2 or 3 speakers, give me one what if for this CO2 business. What if this happens? What if that happens? And then towards the end, the concluding panel of the event will be a panel where we talk about all of those what ifs. We recap them, the risks and the opportunities. And hopefully there will be risks and opportunities in equal measure as well. So there's a bit of excitement.
Carrying on the question of what one of our speakers said last year of what ifs
Jeff
become
Holyoake,
the what is.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the big idea here. If you got a what if from all of the speakers, you could be looking at 10 to 15 what ifs, and let's plow through exactly as you said, what if they become the what is.
So that will be an exciting event. On to our penultimate summit of the year now, and this is our Helium Super Summit, this year returning to Houston between October 19th and 21st. Do we expect similar to what we've been saying about the CO2 summits here?
Yeah, similar, I think. First of all, back in Houston, baby, by popular demand. So we're, our audience spoke and we listened. So we're back to Houston, very trusted venue for the Helium Summit. A lot of big names turning up for that. Again, in terms of the parallels with the CO2 market, very stable for the last couple of years, but I think by the time this episode of the pod goes out, we'll have published another thought leadership piece actually at gasworld.com about the helium business, what's changed, what hasn't, and whether some of the fund's gone out of the market as well, and whether the days of the wild rides are still yet to be seen or they're behind us. So I'd really point listeners in the direction of the Gasworld website to take a look at that. But the consensus is helium is never far from shortage either, is it? And there's that pattern we saw last year at our event where actually, one of our speakers, our keynote in fact, showed how the history of the helium market in the last 15 years, it's gone through sort of sustained shortage, then sustained balance, then sustained shortage again. It's very up and down. We've had 2 or 3 years of balance now, if not plentiful supply. You just get the feeling
it's only one
thing could be around the corner, or it could be a black swan event, as we've discussed before. So a lot to talk about there, and I think as well some more of the newer, wider voices for this event in 2026.
Okay, and on to our final event of the year now, and we're heading back to MENA after going to the APAC region last year. And this is our MENA Industrial Gases Conference this year, returning to Dubai after being away for how long now? Longer than I've been.
A few years in Abu Dhabi now, yeah. Back to Dubai, where it all began, December 2007. This is a really special event. So before we talk about regional markets and that outlook for the year, let's just, pay tribute for a moment. This event, because the gasworld conferences started in Dubai in 2007, we're going to use this event as the start of our celebrations of 20 years of gasworld conferences. We'll be back where it all began. We'll be looking at how the markets changed from, a new industrial gas frontier when we talked about it in 2007 to a rapidly evolving, maturing market 20 years later. So we'll be revisiting that, and we'll have our Vision 2030 theme and looking at, what lies ahead in the next 5 years for that market. And so many promotions and offers and things going on around the 20th anniversary. So that is going to be a real showstopper event. And then, of course, you layer on top, what is going on in the regional marketplace. The MENA region's right at the forefront.
And you were at that inaugural gasworld conference back in 2007, weren't you? So how have gasworld events and conferences evolved since then? Massively, I can only imagine. Yeah,
massively. It's ironic in some ways that actually we got off to a great start with that event. We had some huge names. We had Aldo Bologna, Dr. Aldo Bologna of then the Lindy Group, as like a keynote speaker, and we had 150 people there. It was a great start to our event. Some real tough, gritty topics, great presentations, great evenings under the December sun in Dubai, which was amazing. But the events have moved on so much since then. We have a wider participation now. We have many more consultants, analysts, end users. We bring together the whole value chain. The topics have obviously moved on, the networking and the commercial side of the events has moved on as well. And I think the one thing that hasn't changed is it's a destination event. It's where you get meaningful business done, and you walk away with meaningful insights. So that's testament to how the events have grown.
It's not just the event that's developed over that last 20 years. That region as a whole has seen huge growth too, hasn't it?
A huge amount, yeah. It's not just the fossil fuel riches that we talk about today. I think the region's positioning itself actually at the forefront of all of these sustainability and decarbonisation initiatives. There's a lot going on in carbon capture and CCUS that we don't talk about enough. There's obviously a lot going on with some flagship energy and hydrogen projects. And then there's these mega projects in industrial gases, these huge industrial gas and specialty gas plants and almost like compounds or facilities. Everything in the Middle East region is done on a huge scale with a huge ambition. And that's kind of changing the face of the market. And then obviously in Africa and North Africa, there's a wealth of energy conversations to be had, as well as those supply chain headlines that need to be tackled. So much going on in that region, still flourishing from a smaller base, as we say, but yes, so much potential ahead.
Well, an exciting event and an exciting year ahead for gasworld events as well. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got all the the regional talking points as well.
So that's all of our events really going around the world there. Said at the top of this podcast that we'd be having a broad brush look at the year ahead. So Rob, you're on top of all things industrial gases, all things gasworld. So right now, where are we at as an industry, and what do we have to look forward to, or perhaps not look forward to in the next 12 months?
What a loaded question. What a pedestal you've put me on there. I think what strikes me the most in nearly 19 years here is I don't think I've ever seen the industry as, how can I put it, in such a wave of change. I think the landscape is completely changing. It's almost beyond recognition compared to, say, 20 years ago. And it's changed. It's been coming for a while, I think, in different areas, but it just feels at the moment like the whole thing is is moving. You know, that it's like the sand underneath your feet is kind of moving around a bit and rebalancing. I think I talked about the CO2 side of things. That is going to change considerably in the next 5 years. The CO2 business, where you get your CO2 from, how you get it, how the circular economy works. Helium has been stable for some time, and there's a feeling that could carry on. I mean, we talked earlier about how it goes through these periods or waves of shortages and then balance. But some people think those days are gone. They do think it's changed. And you see like a structural change. It's not the same companies anymore that are running certain supply chains and have that stronghold over them. And then, you know, it's also a tough market. Business feels like it's harder fought for. We've seen some of our, you know, thought leadership views from our advisory board members suggesting that the next year or two is very much about tight margins, you know, capital discipline. We won't see some of those very toppy kind of investments in mega projects. Things are going to be very tight. We might see more mergers and acquisitions in the marketplace. We might see more bolt-on acquisitions, and it's really, I feel at the moment it's just a very different industry to what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And everything's much more strategic, if that doesn't sound too silly. Of course it always was, but it just feels like everything's changing. The whole value proposition is changing and has to be, you know, much more worked for. And I guess we're seeing that in all of the financials, and we've talked about this, haven't we, Tom, in various pods and webinars across the last couple of years. Some of the shots across the bows that we've seen, some of the boardroom battles. It's just a very different gases business at the moment.
You mentioned the financials there. We're approaching financial season, aren't we? So we're going to have to revisit all of those on a future podcast and digest all of those numbers. Those
could be our next pod, actually. Yeah.
Could be our next one, because they will be coming out in the coming days.
That'll give us a bit more of that broad brush, you know, or helicopter view of how things went in 2025, and perhaps how we're thinking about early 26. But yeah, I think it's a very different market at the moment. It just feels different in how things are done and how the industry positions itself. And I used that term earlier about, you know, it's not just our backyard anymore. I think the industry is very aware that there's some different threats or risks as well. You know, we talked about PFAS last year, and Riskwatch covered that. We've talked about hydrogen. How many times? I mean, we forget. We've talked about energy and regulation, standards, harmonization. I think there's a feeling that this once invisible industry is now much more visible, but still has to do a lot of shouting, still has to take its seat at certain tables to ensure that things don't change beyond its control. So just so many moving parts in the industry at the moment.
And we'll, of course, be covering all of that on gasworld.com. You mentioned thought leadership pieces there. We've already had 3 or 4 of those go up on the Gasworld website. Fantastic reads, more to come. So again, gasworld.com to read all of that. As well as this podcast, we're going to be staying on top of all the latest news and the views and various insights and interviews into the industry, and of course across our webinars and events too. So many different ways to digest everything that's happening in the industrial gases and the hydrogen world. Thanks for joining me today, Rob.
Good
to sit down and look towards the year ahead. Looking at all of those, I think I better start packing now.
I've already thought about that, yeah.
And, well, while I'm packing, in the meantime, listeners should like, follow and subscribe to the 1895 podcast, and we'll be back again next week.